Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about books. And today, a little bit late, when am I not? I'm going to be wrapping up the books that I read in August. So sticking to my usual tardiness, we're already partway into September and I'm just getting around to wrapping up the books that I read in August. I've got 4 books to talk to you about today. Which isn't a lot. I know it's not going to be a particularly long video today. I have been a bit reading slumpy, but also the other books that I read in August were for the finals of the BookTube prize, which I can't talk about until the results are released at the start of October. But the books that I can talk about, let's get into those. So the first one is Hot Milk by Deborah Levy, which I listened to as an audiobook. And this is about a mother and a daughter who have travelled to Spain from England in order for the mother to have treatment or investigations in a last-ditch attempt to cure an illness that seems to leave her sporadically unable to walk or feel her feet. In the oppressive heat, her daughter Sophia contemplates their relationship, her mother's illness, her place in life, and what it means to be bold. And this is a bit of a strange book. It's got this hazy, almost dreamlike feeling to it, so it's often hard to tell what's real and what's not. So is Sophia's mother faking her illness for attention or to keep her daughter tethered, or is it a genuine illness? Is the doctor a genius or a complete charlatan? Are the conversations and events actually happening, or are they just scenarios in Sophia's head? And ordinarily, I'm not sure that that's the sort of book that I would enjoy. It's quite fragmentary and things that are said and done are a little bit weird, but I think what made this book into something that I actually did like was Sophia. This story is really internal, so everything is filtered through her eyes and her thoughts, and I really felt for her. Her complex relationship with her bitter mother has kind of stunted her adult life, keeping her tied to this sort of caring role whilst being cut adrift from everything else. And her attempts to understand herself or to be bold usually end up in hurt or derision. And I felt connected with this book on a level that I don't think I was expecting when I went into it. And I think Deborah Levy has a lot to say about the experiences of women, and I would really like to read more of her work. Then I also had another audiobook, which is Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss, who continues to be, in my eyes, like this fantastic author, probably one of my favourite writers. And much in the way of Summer Water, which was the first Sarah Moss book I read, this Ghost Wall is a short novel that builds the tension to a shell shock conclusion. So this is about Sylvie, who is a teenage girl, and along with her mother is kind of forced to this kind of reenactment of an Iron Age settlement by her abusive and controlling father. And they are joined in this camp by, I think it's a university professor and his students. And they spend their days, hunting, gathering food, and learning the rituals of ancient Britons. Tensions rise not only between Sylvie and her self-taught bus driver father, but also between him and the academic students. One student in particular, Molly, she really sees Sylvie's relationship with her father for what it is. And as Sylvie's father and the professor become more insistent on reenacting the rituals, the situation becomes a lot more harrowing. And although this book is short, there is so much packed into it. I think that Sylvie's father is really a representation of that Brexit mindset. He's obsessed with like real Britain for real British people, but he's quite blind to the fact that even as he digs into the past to find these real British people, it becomes quite apparent that there is really no such thing. He is an example that, class doesn't necessarily dictate your intelligence, but the chip he has on his shoulder about being self-taught is a barrier from him learning from the educated members of the group, and it makes him quite bitter and angry. And this is kind of also seen in the behaviour of the students, who probably underestimate him and are quite surprised by the knowledge that he and Sylvie have on the topic. The tension builds as Sylvie's father becomes more entrenched in this Iron Age society that he idolizes. It's one in which men like him would be given their rightful place, and the line between acting and reality becomes blurred. And like I said, Moss never fails to impress me, and the ending of this book was unnerving but also very satisfying. She's just a fantastic author. And the next book has been something of a booktube darling for the past couple of years, and it's Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And I was quite conflicted about picking this up because I like Japanese fiction, particularly I like its kind of frequent touches of magical realism, but sometimes I can feel a bit disconnected. The emotions can seem quite stilted, like they're a bit too neat. And similarly, I don't mind time travel if it isn't too bogged down in the physics, but I'm not a sci-fi fan. So it has taken me a bit of a while to get around to this one, but it's set in this basement cafe that's tucked away down a side street, and people have claimed to be able to time travel from there. There are certain rules to follow, such as, sitting in a specific seat, only being able to experience time travel the once, but the most important rule is that you return to your present before the coffee gets cold. And in this story, we meet the proprietor and staff of the cafe, as well as the regulars and the time travelers who are its customers. Each episode of Traveling Through Time is told kind of as its own vignette, but they're all part of the wider story. So on the plus side, this book is focused more on the specific rules and less on the physics of time travel itself. So that's a fun element to the story. I really liked the rules, and there's no real sci-fi-ness here. It's very much more of a magical realism vibe, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I also really enjoyed each of the travelers' stories, the reasons why they decide to revisit a specific moment. But I did find that disconnect that I so often feel with Japanese books, in that the dialogue and the emotions seem too polite, like they're too rigid and they don't really feel very authentic. And I still haven't really figured out if this is a translation issue or if it's just part of the Japanese culture. I do sway to it being more of a cultural thing, seeing as, I think I've read as many different translators as I have Japanese works, and this is a very typical feel for me when I do read Japanese fiction. So yeah, I guess it's just a stylistic thing. It can leave me feeling a bit detached from the characters and from the story, and it's not necessarily a criticism of just this book. And I will say that this book, I feel like it did actually have more depth. The characters did feel a little bit more warm, a little bit more human than some other Japanese books that I've read. So that was also a positive. So whilst I didn't love this in the way that I've seen quite a lot of people gush about it, I did definitely enjoy it. And I think I've got the sequel, so I will be either reading that or I'll be looking to pick up a copy to read it, because I really do want to find out what happens next to some of these characters. And then the final book that I read in August was The Pleasure of Reading, which is edited by Antonia, Fraser. And the subtitle of this is 43 Writers on the Discovery of Reading and the Books that Inspired Them. And I love me a book about books, a book about reading, a book about anything to do with this wonderful hobby, way of life, that we all share. And authors loving on books is particularly wonderful because I like to see the development of their passion, of their craft. So I was really looking forward to this one. But this is a collection of writers discussing their favourite books and how they fell in love with reading, but it missed the mark for me. Many of the writers I didn't know anything about. I'd never heard of them. The majority were older than my parents. I hadn't realised that this is a reissue of an older collection, and it's just had like a few newer entries, younger authors tagged onto the end. But I don't need to know a person to enjoy hearing about their bookish memories. But then we get to my next problem, is that they all seem to have similar ones, like the same authors and the same books are mentioned time and time again. Obviously, from the editor's point of view, like, people's memories and experiences can't be dictated, but I think it all comes down to a lack of diversity in the contributors. I don't doubt if the author had asked people from different classes or different racial backgrounds who came from different countries, there would have been a much richer pool of experiences to fill this book with. And like, I'm not saying some of the entries in this book are very good, they're either funny or they're poignant, but a majority just come across as quite pompous, quite elitist. It's like a pissing contest of who was the most widely read at the youngest age. And I do accept that due to the age of most of the contributors, like, literature for younger like generations back then wasn't anything like it is today, but I'm sure there was more than just 5 children's books available even in the early 1900s. So I honestly found this quite a dull collection, not the cozy read I was looking for, and certainly not a pleasure. So that's it, a whistle-stop tour of the very few books that I read in August that I am able to talk about. Hopefully my September wrap-up will be a little bit more interesting, and hopefully I can think of some content to provide you guys with in the meantime. As you'll have noticed, I didn't post last week. I'm having a bit of a, well, there's life and mental health issues going on as well, but I'm also just having a bit of a brain fart about what I can post content about. If you've got any ideas of things you would like to see me discuss, then please drop me a comment below. I would love to know. And yeah, I'm hoping that life has calmed down a little bit than it has been from the past couple of weeks. So I'm hoping I can maybe just get some time to sit down and think about how I'm going to be more consistent on this channel, and to think up some content ideas. Let's be honest, borrow some content ideas from other people, because I do not have the creator gene. Yeah, and hopefully get into a bit more of a rhythm with this, because I'm aware I'm being really sporadic at the moment, and you know, I'm not working, so I don't even have that as an excuse, and I need to get into a bit of a rhythm, not just with booktube but with my whole life. So thank you for sticking with me, bearing with my random disappearances and things. Thank you for not unsubscribing, and hopefully I will be able to repay your loyalty soon. So here's to hoping I will see you next week with another video, and until then,